Welcome to the show. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, episode 6.
Yeah.
Today's show, everybody, sponsored by nobody. That means we're available. We have an opening sponsorship slot. We have an ending sponsorship slot and a middle sponsorship slot, as well as our Instagram page sponsorship slot open. So hit us up on our IG page for more information and rates, and be the first to make history in being a great sponsor with the Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we got a very special guest in the building. Have a good friend, and it's very rare in the world, but have one of my best friends in the world, and him and his wife have become Joy and I's best friends. He's a teacher. He's a educator. He is a collegiate football player, amongst many other things. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Nathan Clark.
What's up, man? Glad to be here.
He's a father.
Yes, sir.
And most importantly, a Whitney Young alumni.
Oh. Michelle Obama, baby.
Let's get it today. Let's get it. So, Nate, you know how we do this, so let's get right into it, man. What you been on?
Man, what I've been on lately is this whole Russia and Broglio, man, and, the Mueller investigation and how Trump has claimed that he can pardon himself. You know, what I think is happening here is that Trump knows that he has his base in the palm of his hands. He's using his fake news cycle to keep pulling shade over to people's eyes, that he's leading them towards that place where they'll accept anything he does and says. And that's a scary place for our country right now, I think.
You know, when you become president, you become the king, and that allows you to become judge, jury, executioner.
Judge Dredd.
Yeah, lawmaker, porn star, whatever you want to be when you become president. So you can do it all. So it's only fitting that somebody who didn't get the popular vote gets to make popular decisions. So only makes sense.
Yeah.
So, Miss Blake, what have you been on?
What I've been on is the date June 21st, because that will be the official first day of summer for me as a CPS teacher. 11 days away. But what I really been on was just the NBA finals, because whenever the finals come on every year, that signifies school is coming to an end. So I always love the finals, talking crap with my students. But unfortunately, the past couple finals have not been entertaining, and now this one is just like, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just feel like the Golden State fans are like super obnoxious. They don't want to admit, like, okay, this team is pretty stacked, like who's going to beat them? So I just feel like a lot of their fans are just like kind of temporary bandwagon fans. They don't really know what a flagrant foul is. They don't know any other players but Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors because they don't watch basketball, and they just kind of want to like have likes on their page or seem cool or go with the trend. And then on top of it, like the Cavs, J.R. Smith, what the hell? My morale was just like completely deflated after game one. So it's like, I don't even want to keep watching almost after that.
I feel the game is catering more to a casual fan now. I feel like hardcore basketball people, regardless of team affiliation, has a hard time with this NBA. Never before have two MVPs in their prime played together. Maybe the old Celtics team, but to have two MVPs be on the same squad, especially after one just beat the other, is kind of unheard of. And it's making it hard to appreciate, the greatness that is LeBron right now. We're seeing probably one of the top 3 greatest basketball players of all time, definitely the best of our generation. And his legacy isn't going to match what his skill and his talent has brought to the table. And I think this Warriors team, it's tough. Just because, you see the way they play, the way they go about it, it's just really tough to really rock with everything that's going on right now. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's like basketball is a reality show. Like when Jordan was playing, nobody cared about what he wore, like to the game. Like nobody cared. Like when did that start being important? Like it's just like, come on, this sucks.
When Dwayne Wade came in that suit, that's when it became important.
Oh, sad. Coley, what you been on?
Oh man, I've been on this good music, OVO. They can throw rap a lot, all the drama going on the hip hop scene. It's been good for the sport of hip hop, but definitely interesting. On one level, seeing how Pusha T kind of inserted himself into the news cycle, not just for his bars, but for he was really. It's really been an episode of Tom and Jerry where he was Tom, but he was Tom with an actual plan to catch Jerry, and it worked. He put infrared out there. Drake came back with Doopy, and then the story of Adidon just was somebody putting cheese on a mousetrap, and he got him. So I think it's very interesting to see how this whole cycle's played out. We've all read and heard about it all. And by the time you get to it, we'll all know about Jay Prince asking for the beef to end. I just think it's interesting how it's gone to this point, and it's so many things with social media, endorsement deals, A&R, marketing people, how the whole shebang has come into play. So, whether lines were crossed or whatever, I'm not really here to talk about that, but I just think it's been good for hip hop and put a focus on lyricism and bars and being able to craft a response. All the extracurricular stuff, it's cool, it's fun, but I think it's interesting on how this all played out. I think for Drake, at the end of the day, he's taking the L with hardcore hip hop fans, but his fans don't care about this. They just want to see hits and him continuing to be light skinned. So he's going to be fine at the end of the day. He didn't need to come back with another one, but he has to take this L and keep it moving. Other thing that's I've been on, not to take two, but kind of connected to this all is Mr. West. I think the biggest disappointment for me in his album coming out is not his album itself. As an artist and as a genius, he's given us close to 15 years of good, if not great music. So I'm happy that he's put something out. What bugs me is it's not the original body of work he was putting out. He talked all that bullshit about free thought and Trump's my boy and slavery was a choice. And people say, what the fuck are you talking about? All of a sudden he came back with another album talking about, I hate being bipolar. It's awesome. Mental health, mental illness as a reason as to why he said unreasonable stuff. So I think, the fact that one of the coldest beats we heard with the Lift Yourself and the Scoopity Doop, we're not going to get that as part of an album, but just as its own piece of work. He kind of came back this to cater to the fan base that respects and understands mental health. And I think you can't boo somebody for doing that. And I think it's a genius move. And, hats off to him for doing that. But would have loved if you heard the original album where you were originally going with this shit.
Yeah, well, all I have is 2 points. One, hip hop fans never ever would have liked Drake in the first place. Point two, so he had no real hip hop fans to lose because nobody who really likes hip hop probably, if you really like Drake like that, sorry. But what I would say about Kanye is just like, it's disappointing because it just seems like he's trying to prove that like he's good, like he doesn't need somebody to write his raps, like he's good all by himself, and then it comes out like, well, maybe not so much. I mean, basically, if you listen to his album, if he wasn't talking, it'd be awesome.
Yeah. I think musically it was interesting. So it is what it is. Good job, Mr. West. You helped rebuild yourself to somebody.
To something.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nathan Clark, or should I say Principal Clark, congratulations on your new spot, is in the building today because we want to tackle the top 6 ways we can make education better. So this podcast, our aim, our goal is to explore the reason why things work around them, how we can impact, how we can affect change, and to really give people a new perspective to make you at least want to Google something that we're saying. So, Nate, I've known for almost 20 years now. He's the type of person, you're hanging out with him, he'll ask you the question, what would the world be like if you were born 10 years later? And he's like, I never thought about that before. I guess I'm not going to sleep now because it's really deep. So
Did I really ask you that at one point?
No, I think I made that one up, but definitely.
Like, that's a good one.
But no, I think we want to dive into ways to make education better. So what better way to have a good friend of ours who is a phenomenal educator, along with Joy, who we know is a phenomenal educator, to really dive into the top, not even the top, but 6 ways that we can make this better. I think, ladies and gentlemen, our listeners, our followers, based on your response for this, if you want to Here at part two, we definitely have a lot on the cutting room floor. So hit us up on IG or YouTube. Let us know what you would like to see out of this, but definitely want to dive into the top 6 ways we can make education better. So Nate, Joy, I'm going to pass this one off to you guys, and you guys kick off reason number 1.
All right.
AP Clark.
There we go. All right. Reason number 1, education needs to be improved, is we need to equalize education. So what we mean by this is there was a study done about 50 years ago, shortly before Brown versus Board of Ed, or shortly after, called the Coleman Report, that looked at how students in the U.S. fared on standardized tests. And what the report found, there was a significant achievement gap between white and black Americans. I believe the report found that average black students scored in the 13th percentile, which means that about 87% of the average white students would score higher than the average black student. And about 60 years fast forward, reports have shown that that achievement gap has barely changed at all. So we have a significant issue in terms of equity of achievement within our country.
Joy, why do you think we have such a large gap between black and white, or even black and Latino students? Why do you think that's there?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the schools are still as segregated, or maybe even more segregated than, the Brown case. I mean, schools are really segregated and people aren't mixing together, and some people don't want to mix together. I mean, I feel like when you expose low income students to students who are at middle class or upper middle class, that lets them see that what's possible, or like, oh, this is better, or, oh, I want to achieve this. I do want to go to school. But if they're only surrounded by the same type of person over and over again, that limits them. And then also just schools aren't starting off on an equal playing field. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, a school on the South Side or inner city that's low performing, like, they're not starting. Like, when I started this school year, I didn't have a working printer, a working smartboard, a working laptop. I couldn't make copies. I mean, so you're starting, didn't have enough desks, don't have enough books. I mean, you starting with just like, and these are just the basic things you need to teach. It wasn't like people were like, yeah, we got like 10 dot cameras right here. Here's another one, that like all of them were broke or they didn't care. And they were just like, figure it out. So I had to get my own printer. I had to get my own printer paper. And it's like, I know schools on the north side aren't doing all this.
They're definitely not doing that in Glenview.
Yeah, they're definitely not. And it's like, equalize education. Every teacher should start off with the same equipment, so that if a kid is, so that we just have more of an equal, even playing field. If the kids are still failing after that, it's like, okay, but I can see why kids in the inner city are lower, because it's like they're still literally copying from a book into loose leaf. Like, it's like, that's what I did when I was in school, because there's no copy machine, so you can't make copies.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us to address the achievement gap, we have to address our country's history of racial segregation, especially talk about Chicago's history. It's a microcosm of the, history of segregation in the U.S. So definitely got to address those sins of our past to, confront what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, I mean, just, again, I was fortunate to go to a private school, but at the end of the day, Joy, just being with you, setting up your classrooms and seeing things that don't work before school even starts, so it's when you're going to go downhill, just, resources and investment back into the schools. At the end of the day, we all pay taxes. No school should be better than another. Like, that should be at least uniform. The physical, the hardware state, the opportunities, the transportation opportunities, food, all those things should be at least normalized. So when it gets time to get to the curriculum, you don't have the teachers playing catch up, because a lot of teachers aren't going to take money out of their pocket to buy copy paper for the students. That's what we're already paying our tax money for. So if it's not going there, then where is it going? So I think, just the basic resources and opportunity, it remains to be there. So, hearing you guys, your firsthand experience on that equity gap it's kind of alarming. So
before we move on, just keep in mind, like, there's the equity gap with housing, and there's an equity gap between low income and high income people. So until those things are addressed, it's just gonna be a repetitive cycle. But for our second point is to find a better system of accountability, and that includes not just the teacher, but the administration of the school and like superintendents of district and the parents. Me and Nate both feel a lot of the blame goes onto the teachers, but really the superintendent is the CEO. And if you got like a failing school district, like what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. Speaking from, our experience in the classroom, the pressure that standardized testing puts on teachers and students, which is something I think we tend to forget about when we talk about this system of accountability. But that the need for there to be more creative thinking, more outside the box ideas that can hold teachers accountable to being professional and for putting in the work that they need to be a great teacher. But also on the flip side, how do we hold our parents accountable to instilling the values that are needed for education to happen, and in our school leadership to be the leaders they need to be for a great high achieving environment to occur.
Just from the outside looking in, schools really aren't run like a well-oiled business or a well-oiled corporation with the goal of, whether it's making more profit or in this case, churning out better test scores or college acceptance rates or matriculation to the next school, whatever level that is. You talk, Joy, you mentioned superintendents or hell, even city mayors or municipalities. Like all of these people are responsible for the inner workings of the school. It's like creating the assembly line. I feel you as teachers, you guys are the assembly line workers, right? You guys are handed what books you're teaching from, curriculum you have to hit, what tests you have to give to students, what time they have to appear when and where. So those things are all kind of provided to you kind of assembly line style. The place, it sounds like, where your creativity has to come in is how you relay that message. But then there's so much more that goes into that needs to be factored. And the fact that you guys, your ultimate measure is test scores, or that's a big part of your measure, test scores, as well as sounds like somewhat of a qualitative principal evaluation based on your teaching methods. I feel like the organization as a whole has to be held accountable. I feel like teachers' goals should be held on 3 parts: their personal goals, their school goals, and then the district or the entire system goal. That way your evaluation should be a third. If you hit your numbers, but your school doesn't, you're kind of fucked. If you hit your numbers and the district hits your numbers, but somehow your school didn't hit your number, you're screwed. And that's going to point directly on the principal. It's not really run like an organization. And that's surprising given the amount of business people at the head of these organizations, or at the head of these school boards, or people who have business backgrounds. A lot of education background, a lot of business background goes into these school systems. So it's kind of funny to see that. So just kind of my take as a layperson on this topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to hold teachers accountable, I think it helps to treat teachers more like professionals, and hopefully they, will live up to it. I mean, you have people who are late, people who, like, I was a teacher before, and I remember a teacher was literally out for like 2 months, and then she just popped up like nothing happened. It's like, dude, she should be fired. Like, it's just like, but the reason you can't fire people like this is unfortunately, the union is helpful in some ways, but it can hinder in others because it has to be a balance. Like, you can't protect poor performing, low performing teachers. It's just like, that's like hindering the system. It's like Band-Aids over broken legs. And then on top of it, the performance evaluation system for teachers is set up where a teacher could just be garbage, but the day of their evaluation, which they had more than enough time to prepare for, they had this brilliant lesson that they got off the internet or Pinterest. And then for the rest of the school year, they're just crap. They don't teach like that every day. And so it's just like it's a lot of like loopholes and a lot of ways for people just to like BS through.
Yeah, I think, along with the teachers, we got to hold these parents accountable as well. I think beyond all of that, we also have to look at how we hold the parents accountable for their kids' performance. We're all responsible to go to jury duty once a year or when called. I'm not sure why we're not required by law to monitor our children's performance in school. Kids are required to be in school from whatever time to whatever time, so parents should be required to be responsible for their progress, or at least be required to be involved in their progress. There has to be some type of mechanism that gets you more engaged with the teacher, the school, and what's going on in your child's life from 8 to 2:30, where they spend a significant amount of time, 2/3 of the year, to make sure that you're involved in the process. So I think that's missing right now from the education system as a whole, making sure parents are involved.
For sure. Moves us into our next point, where we believe that we got to move from a 19th century education model to a 21st century model. Coley, if you want to say your thought in terms of the school year, like when it is and how long.
I always think it's crazy that effectively kids are in school 9 months, call it, September to June. And then for July, August, and September, a part of that, they're not in school. That's not what happens in the real world, right? The school year, as I understand, was originally based off the farming calendar. Kids took off of school because they had to help with the harvest. We're not harvesting crops like that anymore. And if you are living in a community like that, then the school district should reflect that. But there's no reason for a kid, especially when we still have these gaps, to get 3 months off to let their skills get dull. It's kind of like when you use a knife, you have to keep sharpening it. You can't just let it sit there. So I'm not sure why we let kids spend 9 months in school learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic, social studies, science, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you just did it for 3 months and there's no reinforcement over the summer months. So that's just crazy to me. And it's 2018. I don't know why that still exists.
Yeah. At the same time, too, I mean, it works for kids who are like, if your family's doing well, middle class, suburban, or whatever it might be, upper class. I mean, the summer is cool because, I mean, kids in China, the number one thing, they go to school, and then after school, their parents make them go to like another like tutoring school, and they're doing school like five hours, and it all. I mean, it all depends on the parents too. It's like some parents, it starts at home. You have to do these projects. You can't just put it all on the teacher to make your child better. But I do agree that I don't see why. I like summer, so I'm never going to go against that. But I mean, I feel like that's a good incentive for schools to do better. Like, hey, if 80% of your kids failed the 6th grade, like we're all working through the summer, or our school year is extended, or we're doing Saturday school. It's like,
good idea.
It has to be something, whereas it's more of a reward to get off. But if your school completely sucks, it's like, hey, why should you get off? You're not doing your job.
I agree. And then on top of it, it puts more pressure on the parents to keep these kids occupied during the summer months. We haven't had to face that yet, but now you all of a sudden have to find activities for your kids to do over the summer months while you still have to go to work. It's not like kids get out June 21st or June 20th, and then you have off June 20th that you spend time as a family. No. Now you have to either pay for a day camp where they learn to play or hopefully make new friends, but those fundamental core skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic, those get dulled. So I think it's crazy it's like that way. Nate, do you have any more background as to why we set up the school system or the school calendar the way we do it now? Or, the broader point you brought up about, using 19th century education models in the 21st century?
Yes, I mean, you kind of hit part of it in terms of talking about the agrarian calendar. That's one of the main things. But when I think of how we structure school physically, right? We have these big school buildings that we all file in neatly, peacefully, calmly, right? And we're supposed to put 30 kids in a room to one teacher. They're supposed to sit down quietly and listen to this one teacher, right? So that specific physical structure dates back to the early 1800s. A guy by the name of Horace Mann was kind of looked at as one of the first education reformers in our country. Started a concept, what he called the common school, where he believed every community should have a school. And when they said community, they meant like neighborhood or small towns should have a school, that all the parents that send kids to it give money to fund this school. And then there's one teacher that teaches all these kids in one room, right? That physical idea of one teacher teaching all these kids, we're basing that on almost 200 years ago, agrarian society, pre-industrial society, where 30 kids would sit quietly to learn some basic skills that they need, right? We live in the 21st century. Our kids are on Instagram. We're telling them to get off Instagram during the day so that you can look at a whiteboard, right? Like, come on now, like that doesn't seem to make sense to me. I feel like we could think way more outside the box, right? So as a teacher, one of the main problems we deal with is behavior, right? Mm-hmm. You put 30 kids in a hot room, who's not going to act up when they're told to listen to one person? Shit, I mean, if we were sitting in a room with 30 adults and one teacher that was putting us to sleep, we'd be acting a fool too. you know?
And it's hot in the summer.
Right. So why can't we think more creatively? We got technology to do it.
Yeah.
We complain about how much buildings cost. So, you know, let's come up with some creative solutions where we don't have to control kids, which is a whole nother topic, in my opinion, to talk about for almost an hour. Like, why are we here to control kids? We're here to teach kids, right? We have the technology to think outside the box of how we physically structure school. So
I think the fact that you're using the word agrarian and that never came up in any of our prep meetings is impressive. What does agrarian mean for our listenership?
farmer based, where pre industrial 90% of our country were farmers. So
You could have just said that, but I guess you did want to hurt
hey
somebody.
man, we got to represent Whitney Young, man. Come on, man.
Yeah, I was the one that told other people I knew what it meant clearly.
Point four. We also need to attract a greater talent base of teachers. And I would just start with this. As a teacher, it's not appealing, just like you say for the student, it's not appealing while one person talks the whole time, but it's not appealing sometimes to attract new people to say, hey, like every day you're on stage. No matter how you feel, no matter what's going on in your life, you're on stage. Like you have to perform, like you have to be there. You have to be present. And that's a lot on somebody to have to present, be prepared, be in front of these kids every day. And then on top of it, you got to deal with their behavior. Like that's a hard sell. So you're going to have to give teachers a little bit more. And I don't want to be the generic, like, oh, let's give them more money, because that will keep some of these horrible teachers who've been there for like 28 years in the system. I feel like let's give more like bonuses and incentives to teachers who are in the inner city. For instance, I had not to brag on myself, but I'm gonna brag on my damn self. I had a kid, we had a test today, and that kid got like, their original score was a 229. And just to be like out of 5th grade, they needed a 221. The kid got a 229 on the first test. And when they took the test today, they got a 242. That is a high score. Where's my damn bonus? That's what I'm saying. I mean, I feel like, give me something. I mean, like, give people bonuses. Or let's say there's a teacher who never has any write-up, or a teacher who never sends kids out, or a teacher who has 100% parental involvement. Like, give them bonuses, give incentives. Right now, all teachers are at the same playing field. Whereas I know, like Coley, with your position, I know, or other people's positions, I know people get like merit bonuses or like Christmas bonuses. Like teachers don't get that. And people are just like, well, your bonus is a winter break. But a lot of jobs give a winter break. So it's just like, hey, like reward people for their hard work. Or I would also say incentivize, like, hey, if you're a first year teacher and you choose to work 2 years in the inner city, you'll get a little bit more than somebody who chooses to work in the suburbs. Right now, people in the suburbs make like 6 figures, but they already have like kids who want to learn, kids who are on task, parents who are involved. So it's like, dang, you're getting more money than me, and I'm working like super hard. I just think that would help.
Yeah, I mean, I think just for me, looking at it as a business or an organization, I think you start just with your base pay, right? What are you trying to attract? Very few people, and I could be wrong, like start off saying, you know what, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. Not to say, you know, people don't fall into the field, but Joy and Nate, I'm looking at both of you. I know neither one of you started off as education majors saying,
No.
you know what, I want to be a teacher. But, you know, we're all taught as we've grown up to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, something, business person, something along those lines. Teacher is never in that category. And I think a lot of that is associated, A, with salary, B, the prestigiousness. And then because part of the prestigiousness is a barrier to entry. It's very easy to enter the teaching field. So you have a lot of people who fall into it, in my opinion, because you can, you know, at 23, 24 years old, you could be making 50, 55,000, which very few entry level jobs come in at that. And the fact that teachers can, you have that. As you kind of look down that scale, again, I think it should be an up and out model. If you're performing, you get chances to move up, or you get chances to get paid more, or you get different, you know, leadership opportunity, training courses that enable you to do more. And if you suck, you just need to find something else to do. Instead, if you just stay alive and have a pulse somehow or another in the education field, you get more money. I'm looking at Nick now. You can't just be doing what you're doing today and expect to be getting paid more 5 years ago. But as a teacher, you can. So instead of investing in shitty teachers, pull more of that money and to the teacher people that are performing, and then you'll get that, and then you'll constantly have that fire in somebody to do better. If you know you're not going to hit your money, you're going to be screwed. When you look at the teachers and how it's run, I think I might have made this point earlier, but you have to look at it, your goals, your school's goal, and then your district or your school system goals. And I think if you look at a teacher and their worth and their merit and you base it on that, I think we're talking a completely different beast in terms of what you're getting. And to have guaranteed money and guaranteed pension waiting on the other side, there's no incentive to want to do better other than you want to do it for yourself, because the incentive is to show up and keep your pulse going.
And to kind of add on to this last point of I think we need to do a better job of preparing teachers and recruiting teachers for what they're going to face in this field. Again, our system of how we prepare teachers is again based on the agrarian society 200 years ago in what we call normal schools, where teachers would go for 2 years before they would be placed in a school of, a one-room school of 30 kids. Again, we live in the 21st century. Let's think a little more creative how we can prepare teachers. I have a colleague that has proposed what she calls grow your own model, where, identify some kids right now, 6th, 7th, 8th grade high school that show signs of wanting to be a teacher. How about we offer them, say, hey, after high school, instead of going to college, how about you stay with us? We're going to prepare you. We're going to take you through what it takes to be a teacher. So, and if you do that with us, you got a job, right? Like, why pay $30,000 a year to go to college where, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't learn much about how to be a teacher until I got in the classroom anyway. So I basically spent $120,000 for nothing, right? Why can't we think a little more creatively on how we prepare our teachers so that they want to be teachers, and that our kids see teachers that look like themselves? Because that's a whole nother underbelly that we don't talk about much, is that, especially where I'm at in Kansas City, that's predominantly African American, man, it's like the number of African American teachers in our district is ridiculously low. So we have to find more creative ways to attract people to want to be teachers.
Yeah, and I just think, like, why, if you work at Google, why, like, man, that sounds so nice. You got a room where you could take a nap. You got a beautiful food court. You got an exercise room. I mean, I'm pregnant and I'm not even looking forward to pumping my damn breast milk at my school. I mean, it's not comfortable. It's not clean. It's like teachers, like, nobody, the work environment is hard enough. And then it's just like, you don't get enough respect, or it's just like people just like, I don't have to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. So it just makes it harder to recruit teachers. I know in Illinois, they have a grow your own, where basically if you teach if you go back to where the neighborhood you grew up in, they'll like kind of like give you incentives and things like that. But it's just like, it has to be more than just, hey, we'll pay all your loans off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And two, I think, again, thinking about the business aspect of it, I think the more you make it attractive to go there, I think just inevitably the more competitive it is. Joy, you brought up Google, right? Google is a super hard company to get in and to get work for. I mean, part of the perks and everything that comes with it is the pressure and expectations for you to deliver the results you need to, right? If being a teacher became a more, I'll call it, desirable field, from the get-go, from adolescence onward, I think you would see a different quality of teaching. I think by default, the bad teachers would be weeded out because they wouldn't even make it through the interview process. Imagine if you have some of your top lawyers, instead of taking all of that skill and wit and knowledge that they've used to master law, if they were now in a classroom, because they possess those same skills of debate, building arguments, public speaking, managing a room, and persuading people to believe their opinion. Imagine if you took people who mastered that and now put them in an educational environment, but you provided them that same lawyer money. Like, you're going to have some pretty kick-ass teachers and going, that's going to make you go forward. That's going to really propel stuff forward. So I'm all for finding ways to invest more in teachers, not just pay them more, but invest more into them.
So for our next point, which is point number 5, to apply more practical life skills and teaching within the curriculum. And the only thing I'll add to this is just like, it's hard to do that as a teacher because it is so much focus on the test that you can't even spend time like teaching kids, like, this is how you talk to people. This is how you shake hands when you meet someone. This is how, if someone upsets you, like, it's so much time that you really need to spend, especially with inner city kids, on just conflict resolution. Like, this is how you don't have to fight every time, but you just can't do that because you gotta get them ready for this test, and they're like 3 grade levels behind. So just like teaching them practical life skills, because on the other hand, you get kids, especially in inner city schools, to me, in my opinion, you get kids who are the straight A students, but they're like super obnoxious. So they lack in character. And it's like, well, newsflash, you're the smartest kid in like this level 2+ school, which is low. But if you're going to be going out there to like a school like Marquette or a high school like Whitney Young, where you're not the smartest kid, and then how are you going to make it through? How are you going to have the character and perseverance to like push through? And I feel like a lot of kids lack just character. They think, oh, if I have good grades, I can do whatever I want, or they don't know how to act. Basically, they just don't know how to act, and it's not all their fault. It needs to be taught to them.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's like a prevailing attitude sometimes that, kids these days, right? Like that phrase you will always hear, these kids are so bad today, or kids are worse off today than they were, however long ago. And yeah, I believe we do have some issues in terms of behavior and parenting, but at the end of the day, I'm one that doesn't believe that kids are any different now than they were 30 years ago. And I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of scrutiny put on standardized tests and achievement. Some of these higher level tests, I guarantee you give it to some of these adults out here, most of them probably couldn't pass it. Like, so as a math teacher, some of these math tests are ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know the damn answers.
Exactly. So
like I do.
Right. So when we talk about 21st century skills, a lot of our kids these days, I think this generation, like, if it's not relevant, and if they deem something as saying, you know what, this is BS, like they see through that, right? Like our generation, I think, we did what we were told, right? We went to school, even though we saw the BS at times, I think, right? Like we're playing the rats game, right? Like this generation coming up, they don't play that, right? And I think we tend to blame them for that. Whereas I think we got to start seeing that as a strength and making if education is relevant to these kids, you'll start seeing them step up to the plate. So
when I left college and I would just do different mentorship groups and talk to different kids, I remember I heard one of our old high school football teammates, I'm not gonna say his name, but he said, like, by 8th grade, you know how to read, write, and count. The only other thing you learn is how to drive. Everything else becomes specialization in your field. But what you never learn at school are, soft skills, like Joy, you were saying, like how to shake somebody's hand, how to conduct yourself in an interview, how to convince somebody that, you know what, I'm going to show up every day on time and do the work you need me to do. You're probably not going to show up every day on time, but what school is supposed to represent is a level of discipline to complete coursework along with curriculum and show up every day for 4 years or 8 years, whatever it is. And that's what school ultimately, really shows you until you get to your more advanced degrees. I feel like kids don't have that. Like, how do you eat when you go to a nice dinner? When you show up to a party, how do you bring a bottle of wine or something there just so you could, just so you can contribute to the overall vibe of the party? All those soft skills probably play more into your professional growth and trajectory than anything else. Teaching kids how to play golf. I think my career would probably be further than what it is right now if I knew how to play golf. Not saying that I'm not doing well, but like that golf, like being able to play golf goes a long way, because that's where a lot of people who are in leadership positions, that's what they can do. They were never athletic, so they play golf. Just learning those different, just kind of social graces on how to maneuver within our society and how to handle yourself, how to be accountable. I think that's lost. And I think that can't be taught if the focus is on reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then parents are supposed to go home and know this. Like, you know what? My parents were good parents. They both had good paying union jobs, but they didn't go to dinner parties. They didn't go out to eat. They didn't do. So I was never taught that. I got to learn it the hard way when I went to a party and showed up empty handed and said, I'm here. I'm like, you ain't bring no wine. You ain't bring nothing to the party. Like, nah, I brought myself. Like, yeah, you're welcome. So it's learning all that stuff. So I think, just applying real life needs and skills have to happen some way, some shape, some form.
Just to apply it back to real life. Like, I like how Nate, you said the thing about how we just like, we can see through the BS, but we are just like, whatever, we'll do it. But at the same time, we didn't have the internet, because now with the internet, that just really, you can see everything going on. And you can also see people being successful who didn't go to school, who didn't finish school, and they're like making money. So kids are, even to me, more invested in school because they're like, I like literally when I had my podcast, that my students were like, oh, you only have 11 subscribers. They're like, I have 400 subscribers for my YouTube channel. And they're like in 5th grade. So, I mean, it's like to them, it's like you got to really teach them the value of school. And then also with parents, I feel like there's not a lot of support for the whole student. And that includes a parent. Like, don't always be teach them how to be a parent, teach them how to budget their money, teach them how to pay their taxes. Teach them the skills they need, how to go to the doctor, how to fill out the forms. Like if the school becomes more of a support system for the parents, once you get the parents involved on your side, like the kids will do whatever you say. And it's like the same concept, like support the parents, support the child, and also have more trauma counseling, mental health counseling at these schools. Because it's been proven that a child that goes through trauma, their education is literally stunted from that point that the trauma occurred, and they don't develop further if they never receive the help. So it's like some of these people are like, well, why are these kids so low? Maybe they literally saw somebody get shot and nobody counseled them, helped them. Like our counselor at our school, I don't know if she ever gets to really just counsel kids because she's doing all kinds of other stuff. So my last point on the change the curriculum is like, why are we still following the same model over and over and over again? Like Nate said, one teacher, 30 kids. Like if it's one, it should be like kids should be able to more have a fluid education system. Like if they're always late, have a second tier start time for the school day. Like follow more of an alternative structure. Like, or they come or they never come to school. Give them like, you got to come to school these 3 weeks. Or if they were retained or held back in school, give them the opportunity to move up so that they're just not 13 in the 5th grade. Because by then they're giving up. They don't care anymore. So it has to be more like options and opportunities for kids, and they'll be more invested. That's my opinion.
I think this is all spot on. Like you said, I've learned more on the job, and Nate, you said it, like in school, you didn't learn how to be a teacher. Being in the classroom taught you how to be a teacher. You don't know how to be a good person with good character unless you're put around in those situations. And school is not set up to do that. The school as we know it today isn't set up to do it.
Amen. All right, our last point number 6, we need to stop politicizing education. And Cody, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate against you right now. I know you always come from the business perspective, right? And as a teacher, something I've always felt is that, yes, I believe there are businesses best practices, right, that we can put into place that hold people accountable, that allow, to pay the, whatever accountability but at the same time, teaching is an intrapersonal career. There's day-to-day interpersonal reactions, relations that affect teaching, right? Like, so we can have this system put in place, but Johnny shows up, and as you said, has some type of trauma. There's something there that, I'll call the art of teaching, right? That no business model will ever take care of that, right? And that at some point, we have to admit that there are issues that we don't have answers to, right? But when we politicize education, what we mean by that is, when we make it an either or situation where it's either the parents or the teachers, or it's the national government versus local government, that we're missing out on the fact that these are just people's lives, right? So at the end of the day, we have to stop and realize that sometimes we don't know the answers, and let's just admit that and then work together, right?
Absolutely. I think it's funny what came to me when I heard this topic about politicizing education and running it like an organization is charter schools. Dun dun dun. Not too familiar with them, but as I understand, an organization or group of people can form a charter where the school is based around a certain principle, or it might be started by a company or organization with the hope of getting people to eventually make it there. And you talk about politicizing education and investing in the interpersonal aspect of it. I feel for all the failings that we've had there, and I don't have any support to do it, I feel like the concept of a charter school is forming to help make up for some of those shortcomings, because they can do things that a fully funded government school or public school can't do. So it's interesting, we talk about politicizing education. I think the charter school system is the ultimate manifestation of that, how it's might be depoliticizing it, but I think just how that's come to life to get after some of those things that we've discussed about, this entire show is being formed with those.
Yeah.
And just kind of piggyback. So like charter schools, like you said, were started along those lines, but what I've seen in my experience, I haven't worked at a charter school before, but I've known people, I've been around them, that at the end of the day, it comes down to that teacher interacting with those kids, right? You have some good charter schools, some bad, just like you have some good public schools, some bad, right? Like at the end of the day, charter, public, in my opinion, doesn't matter. It's what the leadership and those teachers in that building. So that's what I mean. At the end of the day, let's just stop making it a political issue and just sit down and try to figure this out.
That's fair. That's true. I mean, I think too, it would help because this becomes political because property tax is tied into it, and so schools who are in the hood can't get the same funding as schools that are in like Evanston. And then now we're trying to fund all these schools, but they're not funded fairly. And with the charter school thing, I would say I have a different perspective because I've worked at both. I worked at a charters and I worked at public. And the main difference that I see with the charters that makes a tremendous difference is one, they can get rid of bad teachers, and two, they can get rid of kids that ain't there to learn. Like for not every charter, but the one thing that is a top focus is student achievement, hands down. And if you're not down for that cause, like you got to go. And that's the difference between, to me, public schools, because student achievement somehow stopped being the top focus and top priority somewhere along the mix. And I think that's very political. So
yeah, I agree with you. I was reading, trying to not talking total idiot on this episode, started looking into, government involvement in schools, and the Cuban system came up, and it spoke about Fidel Castro and how he, when he first took over, his single largest government investment was into the school system. Almost 30% of the Cuban budget was invested in schools, but that was so he could pass on the socialist doctrine to kids at an early age, and that kind of went all the way through from the teachers on down. So that's the ultimate show of that. Today, between the gun battle, a few years ago when the gender battle was going on in terms of the bathrooms, praying in schools, like school has always been the battleground that we kind of put the pressure test on things. And I think that kind of needs to change. I think we should be able to, you can't use the school and youth for figuring that out. Like, let's use the schools as a place to educate, develop life skills, and make people better. Other point I was going to make on this before I get too far off track, during our last episode, we talked about money transparency. With the church, we asked, instead of saying this school has this much money, this school has this much money, like each school or each district should have to build a budget and request money. And then it's given money based on a want. So if you need X amount for, school repairs and improvement, you put this much down based on what needs to get fixed and what's probably going to break. You need this much for desks, you need this much for technology, this much for food, for busing. I think you should build your budget and then go from there. I think just having the resources at your disposal and having more transparency, knowing that, even if you're a level 2 school, you're getting the same money as a level 1 school, and it's based more on total student count versus test scores. I think that would be a huge change that can only make things better. So don't know if that exists now, but if it does, it's really, really well hidden. But definitely like to see that evolution happen in terms of, the geopolitical aspect of education.
yeah, because schools are getting money just for the kids being there. So the kid could be a hot, funky mess, but they're like, we got to keep him. We got to get that money for that kid that's sitting in his seat.
Cool. So we tackled a lot. We're trying to keep this nice and short for you guys. Got a lot of feedback. You want us to try to keep our topic to an hour, and I think we've done that. But just to run it again for you guys, our top 6 reasons and how we can improve the education system. 1, we can equalize education. 2, we can find a better system of accountability. 3, move from 19th century education model to a 21st century model. 4, attract a greater talent base of teachers. 5, apply more practical life skills and teaching curriculum. And then 6, stop politicizing education. There's probably a part 2 in the works for this, but we wanted to get at some of the issues. And I think starting with the equity gap and the performance between black and white kids, I think once you start there as your general premise and start picking apart why that's happening, you can see where the problems lie. And it all comes down to money and opportunity. So very happy that, Nate, you were able to make it to Chicago all the way from sunny Ohio to join us for this episode. But before we end every show, we like to give our guests we like to give our guests a little piece of information on something that you wish you would have known when you were younger, or something you wish you would have known yesterday, just to kind of help give perspective and help people commiserate with their own life experience. So what's something you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Something I wish that I would have known when I was younger, that it's okay to be confident. As a young kid, I always wanted to be humble, right? Like, you remember me at Whitney Young. I'm gonna be honest, I hated some of what I maybe judged as arrogant, more popular people. And what I think it really came down to was, low self-esteem, low insecurity. So I wish I could go back in time and tell my high school self, it's okay to be confident. That's not arrogance, right? Like, so I have a phrase that I call humble confidence, that you got to be humble, but you can also be confident at the same time. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that, because I think I would have had a little more enjoyable experience in life.
I would say something that I wish I would have known is that when you make a decision about something, especially pertaining to your life, that you need to look at like what's going on around you in your life and why you're making that decision. Like, a lot of decisions that you make, if you're in a survival type mode, you're just trying to get by. If you're like, it's a drastic change. Let's say you get fired from your job, but you got to pay your mortgage and your kid is sick, and now all of a sudden you're in survivalist mode. Like, when you're in those times, those are the times to really, really like pull back from decisions and really think about it, because you can make a decision just because you're desperate. And then when you're not in that desperate situation any longer, then all of a sudden you're like, man, this sucks. And you're like stuck in this because of this decision you made when you were desperate, thirsty, really needing something, and didn't like think it all the way through. So I think the main thing I would say that I wish I would have known is, if you're in a desperate situation or like a survivalist situation, that's the best time to kind of pull back, slow down before you make your next move, because all that's going to lead you to do is like make another decision that puts you in another desperate situation. And then before you know it, you're just trapped. So it's just like, if you really want to get out of it, slow your roll, slow down.
Yes, that's deep. Something I wish I would have known, and I think I've probably said this a couple of different ways, but Nate, kind of going to your point, wish I would have known that it's all right to like different music. And I'm talking about music specifically because, in high school, I remember I had a Discman and I was listening to the Doobie Brothers, and I just, for whatever reason, I liked Blackwater. I was like, man, this is a really dope song. I had one CD at that time on me. I was like, I'm listening to the Doobie Brothers this week. And I remember somebody's like, man, what you listening to? And pulled the headphones off my ear. I was like, oh man, I'm about to get roasted for that. And they started just nodding their head like, yo, this is cool. And then, just going now, how you see, again, as much as I bashed him earlier, Kanye going to Wyoming, and you seeing how people, when they're making albums, they're pulling samples from everywhere, whether it's, the drums from a Doobie Brothers song or the guitar from, AC/DC, whatever it is. You're seeing that people that are defining music and culture, they have these eclectic tastes that pull everything together on the popular songs we hear now. So people are sampling disco music when they might have talked shit about it before. People are sampling like folk songs or European EDM. So I think just having confidence in the choices you make, and I'm talking specifically about music, is just be secure. If you like what you like what you like. If you hate what you hate what you hate. So not life-changing. Wish I would have just felt more confident in that. I think that would have let me discover music that I'm liking now in my 30s even sooner. So
cool.
Cool. So everybody, thank you again, Nate,
Yep.
for making yourself available for episode 6 of the Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast.
Yeah.
Everybody, please subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That's the show.
Yep. That's it. That's all.